Hello, folks. Brendan Chapman with today. It's another video for TheoTrade. It's Monday, November 11th, and we're talking Bitcoin today. Is this Bitcoin's redefining moment? We bring in the Bitcoin chart here from the futures standpoint. Bitcoin has seen significant gains post-election. And in fact, if we go back just to last week, going from 67,405, which is the closing price on the 4th, to today, we're currently at about 88.55 or 555, or where I calculated 88.540. Point being is that Bitcoin is up over 30% just in the last week. And what's happened last week? It was just an election, a U.S. presidential election to be specific. While Bitcoin's seen significant advances, that has not been generally true for gold. Something I talked about last week as we saw the dollar, as I commented in last week's video, gold was just up minimally, whereas the S&P was up more. And on Tuesday during my session at TheoTrade, we talked about a number of kind of, pre-move pulses that were going on in the market from option activity, other things were looking for gold to go lower. And I talked about last week many times how gold may be weak when you think about a Trump presidency that's based on what? Returning to manufacturing, increasing savings, and potentially in the future, at least, lower interest rates as the savings rate increases as we produce more stuff. So all that was kind of packed in last week. But one of the things we saw on Tuesday, so I talked about in my last week's video, in this specific video, some of the things that were going on, gold being up a little bit, market being up more. But Tuesday, it really began to spill out more so into the Bitcoin related space, financials, and energy. And specifically in BITO, the ETF, we saw on Tuesday of last week on the 5th back here. And one of the things I try to identify are potential moves in the market. These are kind of pre-move pulses or something going on behind the scenes that isn't exactly directly manifested in the price that may lead to big movements. And on last Tuesday, we talked about some behind the scenes activity in the options market that was pointing to a potentially big move in BITO and also Coinbase, C-O-I-N. Now, look, these guys are not in decentralized finance. They're all about the centralization of the DeFi of crypto. Again, you take those risks. I get it. You're sacrificing, you're taking risks in order to have convenience. And coin is up almost 20% today. Big movement in this space. And all this ties back to specific activity last week that existed in the options market. And again, a lot of these trades were back here at 215 strike last Tuesday. In the 185 was just barely out of the money. So a lot of this stuff is just looking at potential. And when you see these kind of pulses occur, it creates kind of gamma risk for premium sellers, but gamma opportunity or gamma squeeze for option buyers, right? And so the notion is we had significant movement into the space, into energy, and also financials last Tuesday. And all of these areas have seen significant upside moves over the course of the last week. Now, getting back to the title today, how in the world is this Bitcoin's point of kind of redefining itself? One of the things that, again, maybe a Trump presidency, at least rhetorically, provides is more ability for the adoption of Bitcoin. And right now there's some discussion on Bitcoin in the space. There's Arkk, which is maybe trying to take a soft fork in Bitcoin and creating more opportunity to create contracts and stuff like that. And then there's those that are advocating, hey, there's some kind of L2 opportunities and stuff coming down the pipe that we don't need Arkk that may compromise security, which was part of the original code that Satoshi Nakamoto proposed but pulled out of it. And so the idea is that which direction is Bitcoin going to take? But arguments on both sides potentially lead to it's going to get easier, it's going to get better to transact in Bitcoin in the future. And maybe you use places like COIN, Coinbase specifically, to have the ease of transactions by centralizing and storing your Bitcoin on a local type server rather than being decentralized. But the point is right now, everything is pointing to greater adoption of Bitcoin. And we go back to Bitcoin futures and why this is somewhat of a redefining moment. I remember writing an article back here a couple years ago talking about the halving of Bitcoin leading to a third turning. The idea is we go from karma to dharma, et cetera. We're basically becoming more adoption of Bitcoin. And what's happening here is that Bitcoin, while gold is selling off, right? Bitcoin is advancing. This is what's redefining Bitcoin. All of a sudden, are people selling gold and buying Bitcoin? Maybe, but that's not the bigger argument. The bigger argument for Bitcoin is that Bitcoin in relation to gold is relatively undervalued. What we're seeing here, if we think about all the stuff that gold could buy, Bitcoin is saying, well, look, it's going to have to be priced over 100 grand or more for Bitcoin to potentially have the same purchasing power as gold in the market. And that is assuming what? That Bitcoin's utility or use is going to soon approach that of gold. Is it a possibility? Is it a reality? It certainly seems, at least right now, the market's betting just a little bit that might be the case. And what's interesting with this is that if you think about Bitcoin, be like, what's the point of Bitcoin? It's worthless. Gold, it's worthless. Barbarous relic. Isn't that the point? That money is worthless except as a store of value and as a medium of exchange. And all of a sudden, we may be approaching a time where Bitcoin may be able to be more of a medium of exchange and, better yet, a better store of value. Right now, Bitcoin's been very tied to high beta companies, right? Risk trends, that sort of things. We're definitely seeing that in Coinbase. We're seeing it in Tesla, right? We're seeing that speculative money come in and driving these issues. But is it purely speculation, or is there some fundamental aspect to the move in Bitcoin and some of these related companies? I think, again, there's something fundamental. The idea that Bitcoin may reprice in closer proximity to where gold will be, because we know at the end of the day, the long run return of Bitcoin and gold is zero or negative if you include storage and related other costs to be able to secure your Bitcoin or your gold. But why has gold performed so well? It's performed so well because the dollar has been going down dramatically. It's excessive government spending, debt issuance, easy policy by the Federal Reserve. All of this has led to a weaker dollar and higher gold prices. A Trump presidency may offer the opportunity, right, of the dollar strengthening both in relative and real terms, and that means that gold and Bitcoin are going to go down, except for the Bitcoin is going to potentially start to form more of an equilibrium with gold, potentially in the coming months or years, as we start to push north of potentially 100,000 on Bitcoin, and we start to see this kind of normalize. That's the prospect in Bitcoin. As you look at the periphery, all these Bitcoin mining companies, Riot, Mara, right? A lot of these we've been really bullish on in my sessions the last week, and in particular last several weeks. We took trades, for example, in Riot off of the lows down here. Again, looking for these sorry, that wasn't that one, it was right here. Looking for these pre-moves, right? These pre-move pulses in the market leading to big moves, and the underlying actually is back here. And so the idea being is that this has been a space we've seen continued flow. And today, by the way, it is no different. We're seeing continued flows. MSTR, for example, up 25% today. We rode this one the last couple of weeks, got out of it ahead of the election, but then we saw the transactions going on in the options market on Tuesday. We shifted our attention back to coin, back to BITO. But again, MSTR today, as you look at some of the background trading that's going on, that's moving these stocks, this, for example, this is out in a February expiration. And some of the stuff with the big moves have now gone in the money at the moment. And we kind of scroll down here on MSTR to a 315 strike. It's now moved in the money. That was a roll from a Nove expiration at a lower strike price rolling up. But the market kept moving. We're up, 69 bucks today in MSTR. Coinbase. As we look at coin, for example, again, coin continues to see more option activity today. This is out in that same February timeframe. Again, we see the selling of the 230s rolling out to the 320s, which happens to be at the money right now. Again, $53 of movement today. A lot of these options have begun to move in the money a little bit. BTBT. Again, some of these are more volatile, less stable than others. But on BTBT, this was a NOV expiration for this week. We're looking at the money here at the $6 strike price. Again, the call option buying that we're seeing is helping potentially create potential energy in these shares. If we start to move, they'll start to move in the money. We may see that positive feedback loop propelling the stock even more quickly. This is up 26% today. But when you look at BTBT, again, back this out a little bit. How does this look from a longer term perspective? I mean, this is potentially a multi-year breakout. We've been consolidating now since the middle of 2023. If this is Bitcoin's redefining moment, we may see further upside in Bitcoin related stocks like BTBT, like Mara, for example, like Riot. Some of these are broken out to new highs more so than others. BITOs, more of a diversified crypto miner. We could be looking at possibly 3250 in the coming months. And again, we'll watch for that option activity in this space. But again, if you're confused at what's going on with Bitcoin and gold, the reality is they've not served the same purpose. But ultimately, the objective for Bitcoin is to serve the exact same purpose as gold and potentially even provide more utility and ability to use it in a day-to-day kind of basis. That's the potential opportunity with OpCat getting introduced or other L2 payment systems that are more directly tied to Bitcoin. But we're talking about here greater potential institutional ownership. Maybe do we start to see more companies diversify some of their cash reserves, which frankly are kind of low right now, but do we start to see cash reserves going towards Bitcoin? Because again, the ease of holding and transacting and converting to dollars is very simple, right? And so again, maybe we start to see a bit of a transition. That's exactly what I think in terms of Bitcoin and why this is a redefining moment, because we're finally maybe pulling off the regulatory framework, or at least the promise of that. Of course, we got an election going on in the Senate to find a new Senate majority leader. Again, two of them are probably more of the status quo. One maybe a little bit outside of the status quo a little bit. The question is, can these policies be enacted? Is Trump serious and going to try to enact these policies or pass these measures? We'll all see. Right now, we're all grabbing at straws. We're all trying to find what's going to happen here in the near future. But one thing stands for certain, at least in the near term, money's rotating into Bitcoin. We are seeing a repricing. We are seeing it push closer where gold is in terms of its purchasing power of assets generally. And this is, at least temporarily, a redefining moment for Bitcoin. Now, again, while things are extended, stocks like, for example, Arkk. Arkk is a little bit more diversified. It's got coin in it, for example. It's got, but it has other stocks that are not specifically tied to Bitcoin, just directly. For example, a lot of call option activity today in the January expiration on Arkk. Coin is almost a little over 9% holding within this fund. But in Arkk, we've got the Jan 80s just way out of the money. But notice what's developing here for this Jan expiration. You've got 60, you've got 65, you've got 70, even 75. There's already a significant amount of open interest in here. And now we're going to 80. When you think about what's the top holding in Arkk, it's actually Tesla. And so now all of a sudden we have a stock that's bridging both cryptocurrency and Tesla specifically. And when you start to look at Arkk in those stages of option open interest, let me just bring it back up here for this Jan expiration. It's like rockets, right? They kick in at various stages and help propel. Every $5 you have interest stepping in here that may create that positive, the feedback loop, the gamma squeeze that could push Arkk or its components to 70, 75. Again, a lot of activity out here at the 80 strike in Arkk. There's other activity in December at the 64 and 66 mark, a little bit closer in proximity. We've already made a big move here in Arkk, but again, bigger picture, this stock may be going dramatically higher, but at least there's the option activity that's going on right now. These pulses that says, hey, yes, last week, indication that some of its components should do relatively well. But today, we're not seeing a pre-move pulse, but an intra-move pulse that's saying, hey, there's potential for even further movement in Arkk and Arkk-related companies. What are those related companies? Well, Palantir is one of them. Palantir is up again 3%, up dramatically just over the last 5 trading sessions. When we look at Palantir here, this is a Jan expiration all the way out at the $75 strike price. Again, we're seeing more potential movement. And again, this pulse is occurring in the options market that may help drive the stock if we get any move momentum and maybe carry here. But the great thing about these companies is that because of the short interest and other things that are helping create potential movement, you have this positive skew that makes long call verticals relatively cheap. Another major holding in Arkk is also Path. So we look at UiPath, again, these infrastructure companies. Big move today, high volume. We're back up against the high from September 6th, post earnings. We start to break out here. Again, we had this move back here in August, a seed wave. We're planting a potential trend or move. We're looking at 18. You break 18, we're looking at 22. Seems pretty reasonable. We could get back to the low of the gap day level, the 261% projection. We are breaking out today on high volume. Again, the potential is here to drive us towards 18 and close the gap here. So again, there's lots of individual components you could look at, but Arkk seems to really capture a lot of what's going on in the market today. It hasn't moved as much. It's up 7% today. But as we start to see other components possibly see further or continued interest or new interest, we may see Arkk continue to propel itself and drive to higher prices. And again, this is even exhibiting a positive vol skew. You could buy a 58, sell a 60, for example, right? Might cost you 85, 90 cents. Or better yet, buy a 60 and sell a 62 is costing you around 50 cents. Not a bad deal. Very cheap, but significant upside. And you could even go lesser amounts of time, even like a 20 December here, and where you probably have even a little bit more skew that may make this even a cheaper stock. And you can kind of pick where you want the stock to fall in here in 39 days. 60, 62 seems like a pretty reasonable area that you could look. May cost you 50, 60 cents. But again, you get a move in a day or two, you're done. You're out of the trade. You get a move to 62, 63, you're done. We could hit that tomorrow potentially. We will see. But right now we're seeing is that Bitcoin, again, is redefining itself at a very critical moment following an election that may provide more ability to use cryptocurrency in day-to-day stuff. We're seeing our discussion on the back end of cryptocurrency, of Bitcoin specifically, that may allow it to facilitate in more types of transactions, potentially thousands of transactions very quickly. We have the possibility of it gaining greater adoption institutionally. Lots of stuff with regards to Bitcoin where we may be seeing Bitcoin and gold coming together, form an equilibrium, and that may mean that Bitcoin is going to be north of 100,000, meaning that some of these areas still have upside remaining. And as you look at the volatile markets, the same thing's happening. It's a point where the market is certainly extended, but it's pointed to the fact we may have a little bit more room to run before this play is over. But again, these are areas to specifically look at. Again, continuation in energy, stocks like Schlumberger, seeing some movement, to may drive this stock further. Stocks like Path that aren't exactly cryptocurrency, but are in technology, having positive volume divergences over the last couple of months. A lot of individual things that could lead to bigger moves in the near term. The one area that's presenting a little bit of risk right now, EIX, Edison International. We've got VRT. We're looking at utilities companies being a bit overextended. Key data points this week with inflation, CPI, and PPI coming up. We're in a sticky position where we may see some volatility in the credit markets. And if we see that inflation is coming in a bit hotter than expected, we could see selling in the treasury market that may lead to lower prices in interest rate sensitive stocks like those two. But XLU, you see XLRE is down a bit today. Those would be a couple of areas to look if you're expecting inflation to come in above expectations, or wait for the data and look for the downside confirmation in those areas this week. Again, those are some things that are setting up today. Again, our focus are looking at these pre-move pulses that you could watch for. So again, bearish utilities still riding that bullish wave And again, using out of the money call verticals is a cheap way to enter even in an overextended market.